I'm Ali Zendrian, Editor-in-Chief of Brand News, and this is the Financial Services News You Might Have Missed podcast. This is where I uncover news gems that might not have gotten their full chance to sparkle. And I let my financial advisor and my trusty co-host, Brandon Galisi of Galisi Financial, chat about them with me. So Brandon, thanks as always. We had a fabulous conversation before this, which any week that there's no good news, you guys will all hear because it needs to happen. But thank you for putting up with all this.
No, I appreciate it. And you always tell the audience thanking me for putting up with you. But before almost all of these calls, I'll sometimes get talking on something, whether it's related to what we're talking about today, or in this case, wasn't even related to what we were talking about today. And you're a good sport and ask questions. So thank you for putting up with me as well. So just want the audience to know, like, it's not a one-way thing. So
it is a two-way street. That is
Absolutely.
fair. Yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I think that we're both lucky to have each other. So thank you. As far as our first piece of news from this week, it's from Wealthtender. I particularly love the headline from this press release, which included, quote unquote, revenue can't measure trust. I thought that was brilliant. So this is about finding a different and perhaps better way to gauge success among advisors. So Wealthtender is creating an award based on client reviews, which is going to be called the Voice of the Client Award. It's the first industry recognition that's based on client feedback. Also, for those who are concerned about compliance and reporting around announcing awards, which I know some firms are, they have a clear and publicly available methodology versus in some cases in the industry, it seems kind of like just picking favorites. To be eligible for one of these awards, advisors need to have an average client rating of 4.75 stars or higher. There are a few things about this that I thought were particularly interesting. First of all, I can't believe that the industry is taking this long to take the voice of the client into account when it comes to awards. What is going on there?
I wish I could tell you, but I saw this headline too, and I was like, oh man, I can't wait to read the rest of this because it did draw me in. I'm like, oh, this is so great because they really are solving a very large problem that not very many people talk about in the industry, and definitely people outside of the industry have no idea. I mean, there are so many, and I don't even know if this is firm specific, but I'll call it out anyways. $1 roundtables. I think lots of different, sometimes broker dealers or more insurance companies. Not that there's anything always inherently wrong with that type of model, but then those advisors brag to their clients about, oh, I got this award, and they might have just sold a bunch of products, made a bunch of revenue, and that means they're good at sales. Now, there could be a difference. Like you could also be good at sales and be a great advisor. So I'm not saying that they're mutually exclusive or anything like that, but oftentimes the people that are that get these awards, and again, I'm not calling out anyone in particular, so I'll leave it at that. It's not about client service. Even when I was at a large broker dealer, there was awards about gathering new assets and revenue type awards. And at least that I can recall, not once was it, you did a great job serving your clients. It was, oh, thanks for bringing in so much revenue and assets to the firm, which again, is important. Like you have to have assets, you have to have a profitable business, but that's the only thing that you're awarding. Now, what are people going to do? They're going to focus on those things, maybe let client service go to the wayside because that's not what's going to get recognized. There's not you were a great advisor, like a truly great advisor because you're delivering an excellent client experience. So the fact that Wealthtender is essentially solving that problem of, hey, what do your actual clients say about the experience they're working with you? I think it's incredible. So I have some fancy feelings on this one too, clearly, as you can tell. But yeah, this article is awesome.
I love those fancy feelings. And I've also never heard the concept of fancy feelings, but I need some fancy feelings.
I think if we're gonna shout him out again, I'm pretty sure I heard that from Carl Richards. I think he used to say that pretty frequently. So here's of course, shout out to Carl. But yeah, pretty sure that's where I heard it from. So he might have heard it from someone, but I definitely heard it from Carl.
All right, Carl, thank you as always for your brilliance. I'm about to do another shout out. I've been reading Carrie Carbonaro's Women in Wealth book, which, by the way, if anybody listening to this or watching this hasn't done so yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. So just go do that, please, to better yourself and society. But so among her brilliance in the book was that she suggested that rather than advisors being looked at for their AUM, that there be something kind of metric like the impact on the number of lives that you've had. And so for instance, if you're serving a family, that then not only are you helping, whether it's husband, wife, whoever, but you're helping this network. And so I think that that's hugely impressive, like you said. And to your point, it seems like then if you're focused just on AUM, like you said, from a sales perspective, is it just a matter of like, not luck, but are you a very good salesperson and then you're able to get a really big fish, for instance? And then does that make like the big fish in that big AUM more worthwhile than like a small fish or a lot of small fish, which just seems kind of disrespectful to the advisor who doesn't have as much in there. But I would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah. And I think to your point, even about AUM, which even in my practice, I have both AUM and fee-based planning. And I can do insurance, so I do sell some term insurance. So I know some fee only people out there might judge me for that, but all my fee only friends I joke with about that concept. But AUM can be incredibly misleading too, especially depending on the type of firm. For example, broker dealers. Oftentimes you'll hear an advisor, I've got 100 million AUM, but a lot of that could just be sitting in a cash type account, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily even revenue generating. Again, that's not the sole, that's not the only importance with AUM, but I know plenty of advisors that get at some of those broker dealers who could brag about their AUM, but they're not necessarily, it's not an apples to apples comparison. Typically, if it's an RIA, a more fee-based RIA, say you have 50 million, the majority likely of that 50 million is generating some sort of recurring revenue. If there's someone who's at a broker dealer who says they have 50 million of AUM, very confident that some of that could be in things like A shares or commission-based accounts that are only generating revenue either one time kind of on the front end or sometimes on the back end as well, or when a specific transaction happens. And I think that side of the industry is kind of dying off a bit, as you can make trades for free on so many online platforms. So that's dying, but there's still a lot of legacy clients at a lot of the large broker dealers where an advisor can brag about how much assets under management they have, but they might actually be making less than an RIA who has a decent amount less in AUM, but it's revenue generating and they're serving less clients more deeply.
I love all of that. And just to add a statistic to this conversation, so with a lot of these industry awards, there is some kind of AUM threshold to it, but more than half of advisors only manage about 25 million in AUM, which is according to the Investment Advisor Association's 2025 Investment Advisor Industry Snapshot. So then all those people aren't being rewarded for their good work, which could be incredibly life-changing or life-saving for the person that they're working with, but because they're small potatoes, arguably, they're not getting recognized, which just doesn't feel very good on any level.
Right. And also, too, now you've got the industry shifting some to a lot of advice only type of models, or even just we'll call it the fee for service that doesn't necessarily require AUM. So even if we're looking at sheer quantifiable metrics, and which again, I love the fact that we're looking at more reviews and client experience. I do believe that's superior. But even if you're looking at the quote unquote traditional metrics, AUM now, you can't just look at that, because there are some advisors out there, absolutely, maybe they have an advice only model, or they're doing a combination of AUM and recurring type subscription fee-based planning, and their revenues could be much higher than their AUM suggests as well, right? They might only, quote unquote, have 25 million AUM, but maybe the majority of their clients are also paying $3,000 to $5,000 a year for financial plans that can substantially add to revenue. Likely they're deeply serving those clients as well. And just that their AUM number alone isn't truly reflective of their revenue and their impact. So I think we definitely need to shift some of these awards.
I'm glad that we're on the same page here, and thank you to Wealthtender for doing this. It feels like it's very long overdue, but I'm glad that somebody had the brilliance to do this. Way to go, Brian Thorpe.
Absolutely.
Our second piece of news this week is coming from Take Charge America, which we've featured on the podcast previously. This nonprofit is trying to help people who are expecting to take a big hit financially from tariffs so that they won't fall either further into credit card debt or just initiate credit card debt, period. They were advising through a press release that people evaluate the goods and services that they're going to need to try to see to what extent they will be impacted by tariffs, and also be honest about admitting what's a want versus a need. So on its face, it seems like this is pretty easy stuff, but I could also imagine sometimes a want feels like a need. So what did you make of all this?
I thought it was a good article. Even, the advice that they gave, I won't read through all of them, but the two that stood out was starting to budget, which I would, if I could add a little bit of color there, I typically suggest at least people starting out do more of a tracking spending before budgeting, say, every dollar, because budgeting every dollar, again, if that works for you, awesome, 2 thumbs up. But if you're like 95%, that's a made up number. But the majority of people out there, at least that I've experienced, this is anecdotal evidence, that doesn't work. It's like an extreme diet. If you've never worked out before, going on a 5-day a week, 2-hour a day, and a very strict diet probably is not going to work long term. You might do 1 week or 2 weeks, maybe, and then you fall off the wagon and you don't even jump back on. Therefore, you might be in a worse position. So many people that I've talked to try to budget that traditional way, and exact results. I tried budgeting before and it just didn't work. It was so rigid, no flexibility, no guardrails in place. So I'm a much bigger proponent of, for starting, just track spending, because that's going to give you an awareness. And then even back to that wants and needs, now you can start to be a bit more honest with yourself as you're scrolling through, and maybe you see you spent X amount of dollars on gas station snacks and you didn't realize you were spending that amount of money on gas station snacks. So now the next time you drive by the gas station, you get to choose, hey, is this worth it for me? And sometimes the answer will be yes. Doesn't mean don't spend money, but even just tracking spending, there's apps for that. You can look through your credit card or bank statements. We can keep it as simple as possible. Even subconsciously will start to lead to better decisions. And that's my first step. Now, sometimes maybe we need to rein things in and make sure that we have some categories, but still trying to put down every single dollar, again, for most people, isn't it?
I can't even imagine trying to budget every single dollar. You and I recently went through an exercise of budgeting and combing through my finances. Every dollar, gosh, that's on top of everything else that's going on. That's just not happening. I can't even. No, just body will not do it.
Right. My wife and I also don't budget every single dollar. Now we track our spending. I'm taking my own advice here, but again, that will give you so much clarity. And again, certain mindsets might be better with every dollar, and that's again okay. But give yourself grace out there if you're listening and you're like, I can't budget every dollar. Literally just had a conversation with a client yesterday and pretty much gave him permission, if you will, not budget like that because they weren't overspending and didn't have any issues. I'm like, you're doing better than you think. It's okay. Just keep tracking your spending, keep gaining that awareness, make decisions as needed.
Yeah. And I think some people need that, whether it's even just the permission of something that feels like a need, but was really a want. If you've been really busting your butt trying to get your credit card debt down or something, and you're like, I really need to go out to dinner at the end of the week. If that's your reward for doing a great job, I obviously am not a financial professional. I say go out to dinner.
Well, I mean, if it counts for anything, I would 100% echo that. Wrote a blog post a couple of years ago about how spending money on restaurants isn't bad by itself. Overspending and doing those things, sure, that's going to become an issue, but spend in a way that aligns with your values. Now, someone might not like going out to eat. Maybe I haven't really found that person yet, because I do, and my wife does, and I'm pretty sure you do as well. But if that is what brings you joy and value, yeah, just make sure you're not overspending, spend in a way that aligns with your values, not someone else's, and track your spending. That's at least the initial advice. And then sure, if someone has true spending issues, there could be some behavioral things. And maybe at that point, it does make sense to connect with a budgeting coach. But I think for a lot of people, especially higher earners, tracking spending as a start, then figure out what works.
And I love the fact that you literally use the phrase joy. Larry Sprung and his wife, Denise, are fabulous at getting this message out there. And I think that it's so important because at the end of the day, money does a lot of different things, but if it's not being used in that capacity to bring you some kind of happiness and whatnot in life, then ultimately, what is the point in any of this?
Right. And that's even so the tagline on my firm, and I'm wearing my shirt representing today. I did get it trademarked, so no one can steal it. It's called Maximize Life Today, Plan for Tomorrow, where it's that how do you balance your life? And this is going to look different in different seasons, but how do you spend money on those things that do bring you joy and value in the present, while also knowing that you're setting money aside and you have a general direction that you're heading in towards the future? Because then now you're confident about your future, at least the direction you're heading, and you can, with less guilt, hopefully, spend money in the present, again, on those things that specifically bring you joy. If you don't like buying a new car, don't buy a new car. But if you do, and that's something that brings you joy, even though from a mathematical perspective, it's not necessarily the quote unquote optimal choice, if you acknowledge that and it's important to you, again, I'm super agnostic when it comes to these type of things. I just want people to spend money on their things, not my thing.
Totally right there with you.
Definitely.
So our last two pieces of news this week are around CFPs and financial planning. Our third piece of news comes from the Financial Planning Association, or the FPA, which launched a groundbreaking competency model for the behavioral and interpersonal skills required to be a successful advisor. Brandon, I know how much you love a good framework, so when I saw this, I was like, you got to bring this to the podcast. In the competency model, there are 6 key behavioral areas, which include interpersonal impact, which is basically how effective an advisor can be at building relationships through empathy and collaboration, client communications and critical thinking skills, leadership, which is working toward affecting a positive change, professionalism, which includes accountability and integrity, and advancing the profession. This framework has a highly centralized digital hub, which includes self-guided assessments to show advisors how they're actually doing, which is great to hold them accountable. And then there's also a curated educational content with a shared language. So basically, I feel like the FPA is speaking your language, Brandon. Would I be wrong in saying that?
No, not at all. To your point, I love a good framework in all the areas of my life. I do love a good framework, but I've already talked, I feel so much on this podcast. So I want to ask you the question first on what were your thoughts after reading this? I also do have my fancy feelings and opinions too, but I would love to hear yours first, Allie.
Well, I was mostly so excited to bring this to you. I found another framework. We have to talk about it. But first of all the areas that they touched on. So the empathy, I'm glad that that's being brought into financial services, because I think that we need much more of that. And it seems like the old way of doing things is just to sort of speak at people instead of understanding where they're coming from. So I love the fact that that was in there. I think also having this sort of collaboration versus it being, I present you with a plan, you hopefully do plan. How is that really going to work? You know, you're presenting me with something and hopefully it's all correct and whatnot, but there needs to be more of a, yeah, but that's not going to work for my life and this is why. Oh, okay, great, let's fix this.
Just to echo those, I fully agree with those. And I agree also that the fact that they put this framework together that wasn't just the technical skills, because I think we can all agree the technical skills of financial planning, incredibly important. We need to know, how taxes work and how everything is fitting together in a client's financial plan. But in my humble opinion, those are basically the table stakes. Like, especially when we're talking about CFPs, you at least have experience and you've committed to studying and passing an exam. So already you're probably above average from a financial knowledge perspective, technical skills. So I did love how they dove into we'll call it the softer skills. You mentioned empathy, even the collaboration, because I believe that is truly what is setting the best financial planners apart. It's not because they know more necessarily about taxes or another topic. Again, baseline understanding at least important, but they're able to communicate it effectively. I tell clients all the time, I could put together the quote unquote perfect, and we'll define perfect as optimal from, we'll call it a net worth growth perspective. But if that doesn't fit, like say I put that together for you, Allie, but if that doesn't fit with your goals, your values, I totally missed the mark. That's a sucky plan is what it is. I can show it to all my advisor buddies and be like, oh, this is a great plan, Brandon. But if you're like, no, that doesn't work for me, then I have missed the mark. And also, I also tried to tell people ahead of time, like, look, my goal as an advisor to understand your goals, your values, the things that are most important to you. And then based on your questions and your situation, run my recommendations through your value lens, not mine, your value lens, and then present and then still have that collaborative discussion. Because I tell people all the time, I could ask so many good questions and I do my best to ask as many good questions as I can. But regardless, you're going to know more about your money than I will. So that's why it's like, how could I go through that process? And then there's that collaborative piece. And likely, because I see people all the time saying, well, people aren't taking my advice. Or I see a lot of financial influencers as well that aren't advisors dealing with one-on-one people saying people aren't listening. I've shown everyone how to open an account on Fidelity or Vanguard. And I'm like, it's not a knowledge problem for a lot of people. It's they need to feel like it was tailored to them or it makes sense for them so that they can take a step forward. So understanding that psychology of finance is incredibly important too, because again, if you have a plan, even if it's tailored to you, but then you don't take any action on said plan for one reason or another, the plan sucked.
Right. Or at the very least was a waste of time on your part. And then the client who's not using it, you didn't further their financial life at all. Then do they stick with you because they feel like, well, I should stay with the financial advisor? Do they say, to heck with this? Obviously, he or she doesn't understand where I'm coming from. It's just a mess all the way around. So yeah, I'm glad that we're getting to this place of having a more balanced and understanding relationship between the two parties and noticing that that's going to lead to the kind of result that we want to have. At the end of the day, it would be great if we could eliminate all credit card debt. How are we going to get there if people aren't enacting some kind of plan that makes sense to them?
Right. The example that I use all the time is saving. Say someone's not saving enough and we've defined, everyone agrees for all the analysis and whatnot, 15% is the target for that particular person. Let's say they're at 10% now. Now just saying, hey, bump this up 5%. Now, again, maybe depending on the situation, that could potentially work. Maybe. For most people though, unless they have random 5% margin in their life, they probably can't. So me just saying, oh, bump it to 15%, that's not helpful. Like that's more wishful thinking. It's going to feel so overwhelming that most people will then take no action. And again, now it's a waste of everyone's time and it's a bad plan. But it's okay. What if you could increase it by just 1%? That's like an extra maybe $100 a month, depending on how the math works. Okay, yeah, I could try that. And then a quarter later, okay, now that you've done that, do you think you could maybe try another $100 a month, another 1%? Yeah, I could try that. And then before we know it, now we're closer to 15% and you're in a much better position, even though you didn't do it from day one. So I just use that as one example of, again, as advisors, I think a big part of our role and big part of our value is not the knowledge piece. ChatGPT is amazing for the knowledge piece. How do you apply it to your unique situation is one issue. But then even so, say ChatGPT does apply it to your situation. You gave it all the information, all the questions. They've applied it to your situation and you believe that they did. Mm-hmm. Are you going to take action? A lot of people don't. So then it's still, the plan sucks if you're not taking action. We're back to that.
Coming down. Sucky plan.
Sucky plan. That's
Well, thank you
technical.
for setting me up for our last piece of news when you mentioned ChatGPT. Actually, this is from the CFP board. It convened an AI working group earlier this week in its DC headquarters to develop strategic and actionable recommendations to guide the profession forward. And among the reasons that this struck out to me, on top of the fact that I know that you are the CFP, was that in last week's podcast, I had referenced getting a demo of some really cool AI and not being able to really talk about it because it hadn't come out yet. It's out. So, Fynancial just announced its Fin, which is the first agentic AI powered assistant designed to simplify and streamline communication between advisors and clients. Being able to see a demo of the way that this works, I think that it's going to be incredibly powerful. It can sort clients instantaneously to the point that whenever the next market catastrophe happens, advisors who are using this will be able to communicate that much faster with their clients, being able to sort and understand who it is that's going to be impacted and how, versus the ones who are just feeling the fancy feelings and unable to enact upon this, or having to look through a CRM or a spreadsheet manually to try to figure things out. So I think that this is huge, and I'm glad that the CFP board is going through all this. Brandon, any thoughts on any of that?
I agree. We've talked a lot about AI on this podcast, and where I see AI fitting in the most is in some level of communication like this, or essentially data gathering in a way as well, where if it's able to feed you, hey, based on your past interactions, all the notes in your CRM, here are your nervous clients. If we're talking about the market catastrophe, which that is a mouthful to be fair. So if we're talking about that market catastrophe, yeah, I have to really emphasize it there, where that's super helpful because then you can now streamline your process and you're still going to reach out. Like they still need the human touch. You're not automating the human, but you're just streamlining instead of, like you said, going through manually, even going through manually in a well-organized CRM. Obviously will take longer than if it is just feeding you the right data and you have trust in it. So I think that's where advisors are going to be able to gain a lot of efficiency, where instead of either paying someone to do that or you going through, AI can just kind of feed you the clients that you need to reach out to. You just get to focus on being the human and that empathetic human based back to that framework and empathizing with clients and reaching out to the ones that need you the most during that particular period based on, again, all sorts of really cool data points that AI gathered for you. So I think it's great.
Yeah. I feel like this kind of automating too. So being able to take all these concepts and being able to, normally you would sit down for like a half hour and try to organize my clients. Let's try to figure out the latest investment that they may or may not care about. Let's get the research on that, put all this together. If we can do that in a minute and it's all out there and available, there's that much more time for you to be doing whatever it is that's that much more valuable to the investor than it is you doing research and needling through a CRM.
Right, exactly. Like from your perspective, even as the client, do you necessarily care if I took 30 minutes sorting through data if the end result was us having a conversation? No, not particularly. If we end up having that great conversation, who cares how long or not long it took me? And now I could see, again, AI being used in these types of capacities that could allow CFPs and other advisors to maybe serve more deeply more clients, where it's not just adding clients for the sake of adding more, but if we're able to streamline those types of things, even per advisor, increase the headcount of truly deeply served clients is something that I would not be surprised if we don't continue to see that happen.
You know what? That ripple effect of all this hadn't occurred to me, but when you think of how many people aren't being served by a financial advisor at all and could benefit in some shape or form, I mean, that would be an amazing way that AI could help out this whole situation. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. Right. I mean, yeah, I think AI is absolutely going to increase the accessibility of even, I'll call it human first financial advice, because historically, even with a lot of the traditional and typical tools out there, if it takes 15 to 25 hours, which is a lot of the data, I believe that's from the Kitces report and the Kitces studies, if it takes 15 to 25 hours to serve clients, you could see how it would not be profitable to serve someone if they can't pay you enough. Because if it still takes you 15 to 25 hours, it starts getting pretty unprofitable pretty quickly if they can't pay you $3, $4, $5,000+ a year, again, depending on how long it's taking you. But if now it's only taking you 5 hours a year, 10 hours a year, now you can also charge a bit less and end up at a similar-ish hourly rate. So now you can both profit. So not just increasing the accessibility, but you can still be profitable too, reach a different demographic. And guess what? That younger demographic typically is who we're referring to here. If they grow and they amass more wealth, guess what they likely will do? They will ascend up and become the quote unquote traditional client, where now they're paying you more, or investing millions of dollars with you too. So this is another thing, man, you just really were striking a chord with these today. You can't get me to shut up today, but I'm just super passionate about that accessibility, and I can see AI being massive in that. So, all right, I'm done.
I'm not gonna lie, I was jazzed up when I kept seeing these items. I'm like, this is a good news week. Obviously, I love every conversation that we have, but sometimes it's like, This was like, dude, we are in the
Yeah.
zone.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. Anyway, I hope that you all listening and watching this would agree as well. Thank you as always for doing that. And thank you to Brandon for participating and being so passionate about all these things.
Yeah. Thanks for coming up with some awesome articles and even asking me questions on things that clearly I love to talk about.
You got it. Anytime. All right.